Welcome to Nuclear Learning, an online initiative produced by the Stimson Center to foster debate about reducing nuclear dangers in South Asia. Our first open online course, Nuclear South Asia, is available at nuclearlearning.org. In this video, we speak with Iskander Rehman, a senior fellow for international relations at the Pell Center at Salve, Regina University. We discuss emerging naval nuclear dynamics in the Indian Ocean.
So both India and Pakistan operate under pretty different naval strategies. Pakistan historically has focused on offensive sea denial and has placed a great emphasis on its submarine fleet, which former Pakistani naval chiefs of staff have described as the backbones of their navies. India, on the other hand, has long harbored a rather ambitious blue water ambition, which centers largely around sea control and blue water operations. India is pursuing a more conventional route. It is designing its own ballistic missile nuclear submarines, or SSBNs. It launched its first SSBN, the INS Arihant, in 2009. The nuclear reactor went critical in 2013, and it only just recently entered the Indian fleet. Pakistan, on the other hand, is pursuing what one could call perhaps the Israeli model, which is the mating of nuclear-tipped cruise missiles with conventional diesel-electric submarines. I think that there are several drivers that are motivating each country to move their nuclear arsenals from land to sea. In India's case, the driver is pretty straightforward. Since 1998, when India conducted its nuclear tests, Indian security managers have repeatedly stated that they wish to move towards a nuclear triad, which means a combination of air, land, and maritime components. The argument being that because India has adopted a no first use policy and an assured retaliation posture, a sea-based deterrent would constitute one of the most secure second strike capabilities that India could acquire. Pakistan, on the other hand, I'd say that the drivers are more mixed and more complex. So there is certainly a deterrence-related rationale, but I think that there is also a more coercive rationale that stresses ambiguity by virtue of the fact that Pakistan's future naval nuclear deterrent is going to be somewhat unconventional in nature, mixing diesel-electric, so conventional submarines, with nuclear-armed cruise missile. And that poses all kinds of challenges for crisis stability, and it also makes it very difficult for Indian naval officers and security managers to prosecute future naval operations within Pakistan's near waters, because they may not know whether a Pakistani conventional submarine is nuclear armed or not. In both 1999 and 2001, 2002, the Indian Navy surged elements from both its eastern and western naval fleets into Pakistan's maritime vicinity in the international waters just off Karachi. And in both cases, the Indian Navy viewed these actions as providing them with an effective means of compellence and of intra-war coercion that would allow them to threaten horizontal escalation while remaining under the nuclear threshold. And you have a lot of Indian Navy documents, for example, that view these coercive operations as being great successes and as proving the validity of an Indian naval service which has historically been the least well-funded of India's armed services. Pakistan, of course, viewed these deployments in a very different light. Pakistani security managers have long fretted over the security of their seaborne energy and trade supplies, and And the perspective from Islamabad is that these actions are much more escalatory in many ways than people in New Delhi may realize. I think that there are all kinds of crisis stability implications linked to the naval nuclearization of the Indian Ocean. First of all, there's the question of what kind of command and control arrangements both nations will adopt when it comes to their naval nuclear weaponry. Then there is the fact that both of these nations' naval nuclear architectures are still very much in a rudimentary phase. And until they acquire the capacity for continuous at sea deterrence, which they may never acquire in the case of Pakistan, there are all sorts of issues that can arise from force disposition and signaling in the event of a conflict. For example, if in the event of a future crisis, Pakistan or India surges its submarines from one of their nuclear ports, that could be viewed as a potentially escalatory action. Then there are the risks that I outlined earlier, which are linked to the commingling issue, not knowing whether certain naval platforms, particularly Pakistani naval platforms, are carrying nuclear weapons or not. It seems as though Indian naval officers, when they talk about future conflicts with Pakistan, they've emphasized that there will be no distinction in terms of their targeting. So there is a counterforce component to India's conventional naval operational constructs, which could be, of course, pretty destabilizing. So I think one of the major issues going forward when it comes to naval dynamics in the Indian Ocean is what role China will be playing, not only as an independent actor in its own right, but also in terms of its growing and intensifying security partnership with Pakistan. So we know, for instance, that Pakistan is already in the process of raising maritime forces to protect Chinese portuary investments along the Makran coastline. We also know that China has increasingly supplied Pakistan with all kinds of naval weaponry and platforms, ranging from small stealth catamarans to larger, more high-end items such as conventional diesel-electric submarines. So, of course, that naturally leads us to ask the question, what role will China play in terms of aiding and abetting Pakistan's naval nuclear ambitions, whether directly or indirectly? For a very long time, Pakistan concentrated the bulk of its naval platforms in Karachi. But over the past 10 to 15 years, you've seen a real concerted effort by the Pakistani Navy to spread out some of their naval platforms to other naval bases such as Ormara. But you've also seen a rotation of surface vessels through Gwadar. Gwadar is a port that has attracted a lot of attention over the years. In my opinion, it would not be an ideal location for Pakistan or China, for that matter, to station large surface vessels in the event of a conflict with India, if only because of the geography of Gwadar. It's located on a narrow spit of land, and it would be acutely vulnerable to missile and airstrikes. That being said, the deep water port in Gwadar, particularly if it were provided with more hardened underwater berthing structures, could prove to be a very useful staging point for future Pakistani and Chinese submarines. There was a sense for the past few decades that that China's presence in the Indian Ocean was more of a medium to long-term threat, rather than something that should be of immediate and pressing concern to India. I think that mindset is shifting, not only because we've seen a surge in Chinese nuclear and conventional submarine deployments in the Indian Ocean, but also because of the One Belt, One Road initiative, because of China's growing involvement in Pakistan via CPEC, and also because China itself has stated very clearly that it wishes to become an expeditionary power with a larger overseas presence and with the ability to project power within both the Pacific and Indian Oceans. So naturally, all of this raises concerns in New Delhi.